Okay, we're going to start this Parshat. It is found in Numbers, the 30th chapter. And we all know the routine, but we'll just mention it again. I'll go over and do a review, and then we're going to get into examining at whatever level you guys are comfortable and ready to start examining the text. I mean, already Blaise had just mentioned a couple of items, and we see what appears to be sort of a list of random commandments that don't seem to be associated to too much. But in actuality, they flow really well. And so let's try this. Now, first of all, the Torah text start in the chapter right off the bat. And Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes of Israel, saying, "This is the thing the Lord has commanded." Now he speaks to the heads of the tribes. And what was the thing that he had commanded? It says, if a man makes a vow to the Lord, make an oath to prohibit himself, he shall not violate his word according to whatever comes out of his mouth. And it says that Moshe spoke to the leaders of Israel first and told them. Obviously, the chieftains had to be the ones who understood this concept, because this was something that was part of a description of a leader of the time or a judge of the time, that they had to be people of the utmost integrity, and their yeas has to be yea and nay, nay. So it's an incredible example of this whole idea of vows. And there are laws very specific on how the vows are to be done, but we can come back to that in a moment. Last week, we studied about Zimri and Pinchas, Pinchas killing Zimri and the Midianite woman when they tried to actually marry or have a relationship. And honestly, you understand what was so devastating is the sexual relationship in the eyes of the creator of the universe is a marriage. So in reality, they were entering into a marriage contract in front of Moshe, defying Moshe. Do you understand? They not only didn't want them to have relationships with them, but for sure they couldn't intermarry with these pagan women. And yet that's what they were getting ready to do. So this was not just a sexual act. This was an act of absolute defiance to Moshe. We can come back to it in a moment. But we see Moshe's response is to choose 1,000 men. Steve did a great job in last night's class. He's talking about the selection of the men and some of the higher elements of understanding that was incredible. It says when the Midianites saw the Jewish army, they actually were thinking, these guys are nothing. They really don't have anything. They can't really defeat us. And obviously, the Jewish army has victory over the Midianites without even losing one soldier, which is an amazing thing. And we know even to this day, God has been with Israel on many battles on the battlefield. And if you ever have that opportunity to watch on YouTube, I think you probably have, is about the miracles of Israel that's happened during the war. Do you guys remember that? Yay? No? Yes? If you've seen it, it's fantastic. After the war, the two tribes are convinced that they want to stay on the other side or stay on this side of the river and not cross over into Jordan. And obviously their reasonings for that was the cattle had better grazing lands. And due to the large number of herds that they had, it just made sense. Now, obviously, Moshe was a bit upset. It says that he was angry. I have a hard time. This is my own personal thing. I have a hard time when I have a discussion about a great prophet like Moshe. He is human. Okay, I don't pretend to see him in the world of he has a big J on his front with a cape and tefillin, he's super Jew, whatever. I mean, that's not what I'm talking about. I do think he was a man, but he was a man who was full of the wisdom of Torah. And somehow I don't like the idea when we say, and Moshe was angry. Well, is that really the kind of anger that we're thinking of, or was it a righteous anger? What was that anger? And it'd be interesting to discuss it. Can we get angry as a pious person? Are there righteous reasons to be angry, and how do you control that anger? That could be a whole class in and of itself. Now, finally, Moshe acquiesced. They asked him if they could stay on the other side of the Jordan River, and he allows them to do it. Now, the big question Moshe had was, what's going to happen when we cross over to fight these battles? You know, we have to clear the land, and you guys are going to be over here in, sweet pasture land, and not even be aware that we could be dying in battle. Well, they assured Moses that they would do it, and there is the agreement to go on. Now, this comes to the part of the Parsha where Blaise was talking about the 42 stops that the Jews made traveling around the desert. This long list, it's kind of borders on a bit of boring, but they go all the way up to Israel and back around, and it's just kind of a disturbing thing to realize. And I've heard it said that they were probably being led by men who didn't want to stop and ask for directions. That's possible, but they ended up wandering around. And the big takeaway is God asked them, how many times are you going to go around this mountain? Like, how many times are you going to keep repeating this? And one of the things that we learn in the lesson of life is that life is about this journey. And sometimes you have no choice but to repeat the things and the failures that you've had in the past until you can overcome them to a place to where you can inherit ultimate maturity. One of the things about the Promised Land, I've mentioned this many times before, the Israelites going into Canaan, this isn't about quote unquote, oh, they got saved. In sort of a Christian mindset, we think, oh, the Israelites need to be saved. So we take them out of Egypt, take them to the desert, and then they're saved in Canaan. No, in reality, in Canaan was where they were supposed to mature. That's when they turned 21. You understand? That's when they had become mature enough that Hashem could take them off the what we call the milk of the manna, and the water that flowed through the desert, and the cloud of shade to shade over their head, or the sun to warm their back during colder times. They had to grow up. They had to mature. And that's really what this whole thing is about. It's about them taking another step toward a progress of growing and developing. And there's a whole nother lesson learned about that. There's also some idea of in discussion, and maybe Ross could jump in here because he's our resident historian, genealogist guy. He might have some things to say, but what happened to the two tribes that decided to stay back, Reuben and Gad? How was their life living in that region of the Jordan Valley? What was it like? It'd be something to be asked. The Parsha wraps up in the discussion a very interesting mitzvah for people living in the land of Israel. And obviously, it doesn't count if you don't live in Israel. I actually don't even know if it's a mitzvah nowadays anyway. But they were commanded to build 6 cities of refuge throughout the land. These cities served as a safe space for anyone who actually killed someone. For example, someone chopping down a tree and it falls on someone's young son and kills it. You have an opportunity to run and be saved so that that father who could legally kill you, or mother or uncle or anybody in the family could legally kill you. And even though it wasn't, granted, it was a crime of passion. It's not something that the Sanhedrin said, if somebody kills your child, then you can murder them right away. It's not that plain and simple, but clearly there were cities of refuge. And if you had murdered someone, you have a way to escape. Now, there was a little caveat to that, and you had to stay in the city. And does anybody know how long did they have to stay in the city of refuge? How long? Does anybody know? Yes, Ross.
Until the current high priest died.
So if you're going to kill somebody, make sure the high priest
isn't younger than you are.
Or his foot's on. Wait, does the high priest have to retire when he's 50? I can't remember. I know the priest had to retire at 50, right?
The priests do. The high priest, I think, is high priest until he dies.
Like a king, almost. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So he's a high priest. So make sure your high priest has a foot on the banana peel and the other next to the altar. Hopefully you'll live a big, prosperous life outside the city. And obviously, this is the final part of the Torah portion and the last book of Devarim. So let's get into a discussion. We're 14 minutes into the class. Now's a good time for us to sort of open up the meat of what you see that you would like to discuss. We could start at the top. bottom, middle, anywhere. Where would you like to open up? Who has some insight you'd like to share?